Hello and welcome to Two Man Meta. I'm Mondo Spanner.
And I'm Auntie, and on today's episode of OOP, we are reviewing the My Little Pony trading card game, which came out in 2013 and lasted till around 2018.
Yeah, as far as we can work out.
It beat the 2-year curse.
Yeah.
It had 12 sets.
Yeah, which is pretty. 12 sets across 5 years. It seems pretty good, to be honest.
So let's start off with talking about some of the stuff we've unboxed so far. And we'll be flicking through the cards we've got from them as we go. So, 2-player starter set. Do you think it's worth it to buy?
Yeah, I think the 2-player starter set is definitely worth it. We were able to crack it open, play games straight out of the box, and those games were tight games. And it also drew us through all of the major mechanics that are involved, so that if you did want to build a deck, you know, you could either buy another starter set and then start mashing them together to fill out the play sets within a deck for cards that you really enjoyed, or alternatively you could go and look at other release things like theme decks and the booster boxes and boosters to kind of like get those extra cards that then help to make your deck really kind of sing.
So the only things I can see as a problem with the theme deck is that they're not full-size decks. You get 2 decks, but they're not full-size. But you can quite easily play the game with them. And if you play the starter decks against theme decks, you don't really notice a difference.
They're only down by a couple as well, weren't they?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure it was only like, I think there was 38 cards and it's a 40 card deck.
45.
Yeah, so I mean, like, that's not too bad, to be honest. What did you think about the theme decks?
The theme decks, I think, are amazing.
Yeah, I would go with that. So, like, here's why the theme decks are so great, okay? You get a double-sided foiled main character, who is like basically what you generally building your deck around. You get an unfoiled one. The reason you get 2 is because all of the theme decks are dual color, because to play this game effectively, you need a dual color deck, as far as we can work out. So you get your main characters, you get a complement of problems, including starting problems, which are critical, or absolutely necessary to be able to play the game. And then you get a deck with all of the different kinds of cards you need. So, for example, troublemakers, friends, events, and resources. So resources, and let's see if we've got an event. Where's an event? Oh, there's an event. Okay, so I think the theme decks are really, really good. And I think that's where the game really starts to open up, because you can definitely start building decks around theme decks easily. And because as well, there's only 6 of these, isn't there?
Yeah, so there's 6 characters. So it becomes you definitely should buy the starter set, because there's 2 characters in there that are fixed. You're just going to get those characters easy. Just buy it straight away. Buy 2 of the theme decks, because there's only 2 in this set, and then you have all the characters ready to go. I really like the dual main characters in the theme decks, because even though you only get to use one at a time, it gives you a way to slightly customize the way your theme deck plays straight away. And it's also a nice way to just get all the characters nice and easily. You don't have to go searching through hundreds of booster packs to find them.
Yeah, definitely. Or swap with your mates and all the rest of it. So.
And both of these, the 2-player starter sets and the theme decks, are just fun to play.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
I'd go with that.
Booster boxes. Is a booster box worth buying?
Yeah, booster box is super worth buying.
We've got some cards missing out of here because we've got like 4 decks built at the minute, because we're really enjoying this game. And, there's a lot of play sets we got out of these. Not so much in the rares and uncommons, but the commons were just like, I think we've got pretty much play sets of everything, but you can't ask for everything in a box.
That's it, exactly. Like, I think, it's what's the word? You can't expect it. Like, you can't like in any card game, you wouldn't expect to get a full set out of a single booster box.
I'm pretty sure we got all the problems. That's just sitting in one of my decks.
Yeah.
And okay, let's move on to. I think we've covered booster boxes.
Yeah, but basically, booster box is good. There is one thing I think we need to talk about though. You have a main set, you have a foil set, which is not actually all of the cards in foil. It's only 40 of the cards in foil. And then you have super rares, or what are they called?
So that's the foiled set. So I think...
Oh, here we go. You are ultra rares. You have like ultra rares. And like the thing about that is that like it's really interesting that you're effectively almost trying to collect 3 different sets out of one thing. But what is a positive that we both noticed and that you really liked as well in particular is that the ultra rares and the foils
replace common cards.
Whoa.
So it's not like Magic where getting that mythic stiffs you on a rare. You get your mythic, but you also get your rare. So every ultra rare pack is essentially a double rare pack.
Yeah, which is just, you know, like...
It just feels so nice.
Well, it creates value for money, right? Like, so, you know, like we got Princess Celestia was one of the ultra rares we got. Where are the other ones?
I don't know unless they're in the
if you've watched the booster box, if you've watched the booster box opening video, then obviously you will have seen them in there. But yeah, like you know, we sorted them into number order, didn't we? We put them in a folder. One thing I really like as well is that if you sort them into number order, it gives you all of the cards of one colour in one place.
You will have heard me gripe on so many videos about this. It's nice to have a set. Okay, when you get into the ultra rares and parallel sets, then it's a bit annoying that you don't just stick the foil version on top of the normal version. You could do that with no drama.
I suppose so, but like at the same time, at least it kind of like at least it gives it like a specific place where you can, you know, collect them to effectively.
One thing we don't know about in the booster boxes is it shows that there are foil versions and non-foil versions of all the main characters. So there are 12 cards essentially for 6 cards.
For 6 cards.
But we've only seen the foil ones, and indeed only seen main characters out of the starter sets and the theme decks. We didn't pull one out of a booster box, so we can't really say that they are in there.
But that to me is a positive, because it means once again, just like with the ultra rares replacing and the foils replacing commons, it means that you know you're still getting your money's worth out of the box. You're not like getting a whole slew of cards where you're like, oh, that's great. You know, like in Magic, if you buy a commander deck, if you then open a booster box, there's a chance that you can get the same characters from your commander deck in the booster box. Whereas in this game, that didn't seem to occur. So
it's not like Terminator where we got flooded with more characters than we're going to use.
That creepy kid with the red eyes, man.
So moving on to the skin of the game. Neither of us were particularly interested in the skin of the game to begin with.
Yeah.
But I think it's grown on us. Like, I'm assuming that the artwork is screen grabs from the TV series because it looks like it, to be honest, rather than looks like art done specifically for the game.
But so basically, like, I'm not a big fan of skin. I don't give a monkeys about MLP. All right, like a bunch of prancing ponies and all the rest of it, I couldn't give a monkeys about. However, there is an inbuilt level of comedy, and there's loads of references to other source material. So, for example, you got Dance Fever. Matey Jim is in his disco kit. He's loving it. There's another card called The Horror, which is like a reference to Apocalypse Now.
Do it properly. The Horror.
The Horror. So, yeah, so...
My pinky sense is tingling.
My pinky sense is tingling is
the
beast.
Spider-Man reference.
Yeah, awesome source. And then there was one that was really, really cool, and you will have seen this when we opened the booster box, which is the flavor text is like some random like stream of letters.
It's an event.
It's so cool. Here we go. Yeah, so look, back where you began, and it's like, you know, it's flavor text is like some wiggling path, and it's called Back Where You Began. So I think there's some really kind of like really great like E up, A up. So if you're a northerner in England, like E up, like that's just quite funny. I think there's just some really good little quirky comedy bits that, when you don't really care about MLP, still keep you engaged in it. However, we've talked about, haven't we? Like we're quite deeply steeped in our history is in Games Workshop products. You could literally slap a 30k skin on this, where each colour is a different legion.
Yeah.
And away you go. You wouldn't even have to change the words.
No, you wouldn't have to change anything. And if I won the lottery and I bought the rights to this, I would license 40k art, to be honest. And I would just shrink down a text box and have a big art piece.
Massive
because
picture.
the layouts are fine as they are, but I just like big art cards.
Yeah, right. So like the layouts are great. The only thing you'd have to change is the names.
Yeah. There is a little confusion when you start learning the game in that this is the power and that is the cost. And with a lot of games...
That's the requirement. That's
the cost and requirement, yeah. So in a lot of games, in the top corner, you see the cost rather than the power it brings.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal. It's just a little one that you have to work out when you first start playing because you're using other games as a reference.
But what are your colours?
You just do a legion.
So yeah, so exactly. So you've got blue, ultramarines, easy peasy. You've got pinky red. Well, you could have like blood angels, or you could have something else like that. You've got purple. That's Emperor's Children. You've got white scars. You know what I mean? Like it would be so easy to just whack any kind of your favoured skin over this, and then it would just play exactly the same.
You just change simple wordings from like it being a problem to it being a battle or a mission.
Yeah, that's it.
Like this skin lends itself to being swapped out for other things so well because the game isn't heavily based on the actual skin. It is just a skin put over a really fundamentally good game in my book.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Again, we've said with the art, like the art is what it is. It's not something we're going to be amazed by, but it's nice for what it is.
Yeah, and like I think like the foiling and stuff like that, like I'm not too like, you know, like the foiling's not blowing you away, but at the same time it's not like, you know, like it's quite subtly done. You know, so like on this,
I don't know if that's actually coming up.
So on this card here, you've only got like this cloud is a bit foiled. So basically, it's where the silvery whiteness is. That's where the foiling is. And you've got all of
the icons foiled as well. Like it's a nice little foiling. I'm always going to be a big fan of like full foiled cards or reverse hollows. It's just something I like.
Yeah, I mean, but like when this was released, they weren't really doing reverse hollows and stuff like that. What was Pokemon doing when this was released in 2013?
Yeah, I think Pokemon was doing reverse hollow. I'm certain they were doing reverse hollows back then.
Fair enough.
But I think that is a ridiculously minor gripe.
Yeah.
Like that is just a personal preference thing. I can't actually put this down. There is just so many good things to say about it. Any of my gripes are so minor, they're not worth bothering with, really.
Yeah, that's fair.
So moving on to the sets, we've talked about how there's different sets within the set.
Yeah, so I think there was 12 sets, wasn't there, that we counted up. And we've only bought into the Premiere set. Theoretically, I suppose it would be really interesting to see just how profound the power creep was across those 12 sets. But the Premiere set, for example, I think is quite balanced.
I would love to see
internally
new
balanced
mechanics put into it, like new actual cards, because you've got your events, your troublemakers and stuff like that. But I'd love to see something different. I don't even know what I'd want in it.
Well, expanding really of the troublemaker mechanic would be really interesting. The troublemaker mechanic in this is of great interest. In actual fact, talking about it, shall we rock into mechanics?
Yeah, let's go straight into the mechanics.
So, there are a number of mechanics in this game that make it top drawer.
So the first thing I want to point out, mechanic-wise, is that there aren't resource cards like energy or land, but your essential creatures in this are also your resources, because you have your action points, but they also generate power that can be a requirement to play the card in the first place.
Yeah, so for example, if I wanted to play Granny Smith, I need to have one strawberry or peach or whatever that is out first. But the thing, or it might be even an apple, because I'm sure applesauce is their character. Anyway, whatever. So to get this Granny Smith out, I've got to have, oh, and also that's an apple, isn't it? Right, all right, sorry kids. Anyway, so to get this one out, to get this Granny Smith out, I've got to already have one apple on the board. Well, that can either be my main character, or alternatively, I might have already cast out Auntie Applesauce. So she is adding 1 apple. So what you can do in a turn is say, for example, I only had a purple main character and all the rest of it. I could cast Auntie Applesauce to get me my 1 apple, and then I can cast Granny Smith directly after that because her requirement is 1 apple. So that in itself is quite an interesting way of doing it, and it does work. And also as well, it lends itself to deck building because you want to have cards like Auntie Applesauce, and in every colour there is a card where it's 2 resources or 2 action points, sorry, to cast it or play it out, and then it has 2 power, and so therefore you can ramp from turn to turn. You can ramp into bigger characters, and that in itself is just such a really interesting mechanic. It makes you think about what order am I going to have to play these cards out from my hand, instead of just going yeah, here's all what I've got, so, just slapping it down.
One of the other good things about that as well is you get to choose which of your main characters you start with on the board that effectively gives you 1 resource of that colour.
Yeah, so like this would always count as 1 resource, but once they flip, you're pretty much laughing because it's then 3, you've got 3 of that colour and you're good to go.
And the flip mechanic is really cool as well because each character, and some are better than others, and we found ones that are really easy to block and ones that are just impossible to block.
Yeah.
But they each have their own mechanic to flipping, which is really nice.
Yeah. And that's what adds the flavour to those decks, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And that's one of the things, really, I think where, I mean, look, it's almost an ultramarine symbol in its own right. But like, I think that's where it lends itself to, like, you could rip the skin off of this. You could rip the artwork and everything else off and just literally leave the text and the, and the icons and the mechanics on it. And yeah, you could just replace it with anything. And so therefore, although MLP itself is not appealing, like the actual, the franchise or whatever, in your head, you don't necessarily have to hold that to, you don't have to hold that there. There's no, you can just have, you can be away with you can be away with your own, like, I don't know, narrative or like whatever over the top of it.
The problems are also a really good mechanic.
Yeah.
So in a problem deck, you have starting problems that you can whack out to begin with. So you can choose to start.
Don't you? You have to start
with a starting problem, but you get to choose.
Yeah.
So you can take something nice and easy, or you can put something higher out and harder to get those extra points. If you think you've got a ramping deck that can just spit out all the requirements, and some of them have abilities on as well. So it's really interesting, and there's a real nice back and forth of, whereas you have to get typically less power on the board than your opponent, you have to get specific colours, whereas your opponent doesn't.
Yeah.
So although it seems like they have to score more, because they do, there's less requirement on it because it's less specific.
Because they can combine any colours, and then so therefore it makes it a lot easier. One of the things that I think we should talk about definitely is like the points and how the points affect the number of action points you get. So if you look on here,
yeah, this is a really good system.
Like it's one of the best balancing mechanics I've ever seen in a card game. So basically what happens is when you start with, like, both of you start with no points because you haven't scored anything at the beginning of the game, which gives you 2 action points, and you use those 2 action points to cast out your characters. So that's these grey symbols.
But you can also hold on to them.
Yes,
and
they
store them for
carry
extra
over
turns,
so
which is really nice.
Yeah, that's great. And then also, say your opponent goes ahead of you in their turn, normally that would be detrimental to you because they're ahead of you. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're beating you in the game now. However, in this game, it's really good that, say, for example, they gain 6 points. That now increases the number of action points you get. That is such a
even early
awesome
on in
mechanic.
the game.
Yeah,
as soon as you score 2 points, either player, then you're up to 3 actions.
And they will automatically score 2 points as soon as they've solved their starting problem, because you get 1 point for confronting and you get 1 point for solving. So as soon as your opponent solves their starting problem, it automatically then gives you a boost in your turn.
Also, as long as you're sat on a problem confronting it, you're essentially ticking points up one at a time every turn, so your opponent has to do something about it.
Yeah, definitely.
And the way you can trigger the double face-offs, if you watch the tutorial video, we'll explain that more so we don't have to in this. but you can use that as a trigger to just wipe the board, but also score some points. But we've had games, like we had a game yesterday where I triggered one.
You triggered a double face-off in your turn, but I won it.
And he won it, and it was devastating because I hadn't flipped my main character because I just couldn't in that game. So all of a sudden, I'm losing so many of my friends from the game that it was just hard to recover from.
But it wasn't just that though as well. Like I gained a whole bunch of points in your turn, and so that was incredibly strong because then that bounced me across the threshold, so I then got more actions, which then allowed me to have like an absolutely super duper turn. So yeah, really,
the troublemaker
really strong,
mechanic is really strong as well, where you can essentially offer up bonus points to your opponent for confronting that troublemaker going the wrong way.
Oh, well, I thought that at the beginning.
So they can get the bonus points for confronting those troublemakers, but it stops them scoring while that troublemaker is out. So if you can get something big out, like a Timberwolf here, they suddenly can't score until they can deal with that, and that can be a real problem. Or they can try and take it on when they've got low power to beat it, but that means they could bounce ponies back from the problem to home.
I thought as well, like when we first started playing Troublemakers, we were kind of like mistiming it, weren't we?
Yeah.
But once you work out the actual timing of it, which is you play it in your turn face down, and then in your following turn it goes face up, it not only does that give your opponent a small window of time to deal with that problem before the Troublemaker is out, or before it's flipped, but it also once again it generates an impetus for them to actually deal with that problem almost immediately. Otherwise they are at a negative effect, and
the timing
so
on the Troublemakers was the only part of this game that brought any confusion, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
The rest of it was pretty straightforward, and it's just like every part of this seems like a good mechanic. Like the problem decks seem really good. Yeah. So the way you can choose starting problems out of there seems really good. The bonus points, the way you can just sit on one and tick points over, but then you can go for the face-off and then potentially generate more points out of that. The Troublemakers and how you can slow your opponent, but also offer up points if they can beat it. So if they beat it fast enough, they're essentially gaining without any loss.
Yeah.
Like it's really,
Plus
really
as well,
good.
it allows you to double score in your turn, because if you say defeat the Timberwolves, then you get 3 extra bonus points. Then you might be confronting that problem now. So therefore, or during the main phase, you can cast friends out so that you are then defeating that problem or confronting that problem, sorry. And then at the end of it, you might have been the first person to solve it or confront it. And so therefore you get those bonus points. So you
might even trigger a face-off or double face-off on top of that and potentially get even more points.
But then the best bit about it is that then in your opponent's following turn, because you've just juiced so many points, they get a bonus because they get extra action points. And so therefore it keeps this like uneasy balance going all the way through the game. It's just like,
I think
it's the thing that makes this game, I think.
I think the balancing is so well done that we've had very, very few games where it hasn't been a backward and forward. Yeah. There's been like one or two.
There's been no walkovers,
games.
Is there really at all? It's like, oh my God, it's just disappointing it's got an MLP skin on it, because genuinely, like, I would rate this as good as Transformers.
So we haven't reviewed Transformers.
Yeah, but we both played it, didn't we, like to death?
So if we rated it on the stuff we've looked at, we sang the praises of X-Men, but this is better.
Yeah,
the starter set.
Yeah. This pwns X-Men, and X-Men pwns Warhammer, and Warhammer pwns Terminator. So on a sliding scale of the games that we've reviewed so far on the channel, this one is definitely the standout game out of the 4.
This is another nice one as well, the events. So there are cards, I imagine all of ours are in decks. Oh no, here's an example of one. So you can play it in the main phase, choose a character that is yellow or purple. That character gets +1 yellow, +1 purple until the end of the phase. So you can't use it in the scoring turn.
Yeah, scoring phase, yeah.
You can use it in the main phase to cast out other ponies when you get essentially screwed on cards and you can't hit the colour you want.
Yeah.
So there's even a balancing mechanic for dealing with mana screw, essentially.
Yeah.
It's just so well worked out. And the fact that some of the most powerful cards can be a cheap cost, but also have colour requirements to sort of bring that balance in of, like, when you need to draw cards, for instance, when I've been playing pink the most, so that's what I'm going to reference here. I have to have 2 pink out to draw 3 cards. It only costs me 1, which is brilliant, because normally you can pay an action to draw a card, even though you draw at the beginning of your turn anyway, so it also helps deal with mana screwing.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's a requirement there, so I'm paying 1 and getting more than I normally would, but I have to have stuff on the board to do that. Like, this game is so well balanced.
I think as well, like, say in Magic, you know, like, there's a major thing in Magic, isn't there, where the more cards you draw, effectively, the better off.
Card advantage, yeah.
You know, you got card advantage. In this, that's not so much of a thing, because I can just spend an action point to draw an extra card. And then also, the beautiful thing about that is you can spend your action points. So say you had like 5 action points, maybe you've saved them up over a couple of turns, or your opponent's had an incredible turn, and so therefore you've ended up, I don't know, saving 1 and gaining an extra 4. But you could spend 1 action point, still leave yourself with loads of action points to cast, draw into a card and cast that card out. It's just like that, you know what I mean? And everybody's got access to it. That's what makes that beautiful.
Even better is you can draw that card, and if you can't cast it, you just spend another point and draw another card.
Yeah, that's it. But I think as well, like, the thing that makes it strong and balanced is the fact that everybody can do it. You know, it's not like, you know, like, it's like in Magic, isn't it? Like, blue is like the card drawer, isn't it?
That is one thing I really want to talk about with this as well, is the colour pie. Anyone familiar with Magic theory is like, they'll know what the colour pie is. It's basically like the faction ability sort of thing. And this card does that really well.
Yeah.
Each faction has its own, so the characters are the best example of this in the keyword video we did. So, for instance, blue has Swift. You may move this card for 1 fewer action tokens.
Strong.
So, on their characters, you can move them around a lot for cheaper, but also one of their faction traits seems to be you get +1 when doing face-offs, or +2 when doing face-offs. So you get a bonus to face-offs.
They're fast, they're hard.
They're cheap to move around.
Yeah. And there was one, wasn't there, where when you play it out, it draws 3 friends to it.
Yeah.
That is like if you play that not at the beginning of the game, but like after you've solved your first problem, when everything's gone back to your home. Oh my God, that is so strong.
So pink I can talk about as well, because that is, like I say, the one I've been playing the most. So you get random as the ability in this. So in a face-off, if you flip a card that has 1 power, you can ignore it and then flip a new card. That's a strong ability because it's a reroll. But their trait is also that they seem to draw cards. So
yeah, because there's a lot where you play them out and then you draw a card.
Yeah, there's events to draw cards. There's characters like this one here. So he costs 2 for 1, which doesn't sound great, but you get to draw a card as well.
Yeah, I think purple, which I've been playing quite a lot of, is for messing with your opponents. So, for example, they've got one character which gives every single... Yeah, we'll get to him in a second. So we've got one character called Lady Judge, and she makes every single opponent card on at a problem -1 power in a face-off, which is horrifically strong, because you end up stacking up loads of characters onto a problem, and then you just like, oh look, there you go. Or your opponent puts loads of characters on a problem, and they're all like one power characters, and you just whack Lady Judge down. Well, now when they try and do the double face off, they've all got a power of 0. That's a sad face right there. And then also they've got an event which gives all of your characters in a problem +1 power. You've got this guy Mare, who basically you can pay 3 action points in your main phase to move one of your opponent's characters. So that means you can either move them off of a problem onto another problem, which is quite interesting, because that messes them up for the next turn when they're doing their point scoring, because they've got to build that into what they're going to do with their action points. Or alternatively, you can whack them back onto the home, into the home area, and then that's like just removes all of their abilities from any given problem.
But even then, we found with this card there is balance built in, because you're paying 3 to move them and they can pay 2 just to move them back.
Yeah.
So you're essentially losing out, but it's such a strong ability.
Yeah.
Like everything seems so well balanced.
It's really useful in a pinch. And one of the things as well is there are very few cards that interact with your opponent in their turn. You have to do everything in your turn kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? And that's really cool.
So one of the others we've had quite a lot of fun with playing was yellow.
The poor friends.
So these guys essentially are all about having lots of critters out to buff each other. So they got a caretaker ability where they get +1 for having a critter friend there. So that is the guys with this symbol.
Yeah.
So as soon as they have one there, this character gets +1.
Or like this guy here, he's got 0 power, this owl, but each of your other characters at a problem with this card gets +1 power, which is very, very, like, you know, like if you've got loads of small critters out and then you put this guy down, you're effectively doubling your power, you know. And also as well, the thing I like about this is it's almost like diminishing returns, because it's better on the small characters than it is on the big characters, because you're getting effectively more of a proportional bit of leverage, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? Like it's effectively doubling their power, whereas on this guy it's only increasing it by 1/3. So yeah, really, really, like that to me feels like another example of just really good internal mechanics kind of thing, or internal balance. What was the other one? There's white, isn't there? They just seem to like be good at slapping stuff.
Inspired is a mechanic we always forget to use, but is a really, really strong mechanic. So at the start of the main phase, look at the top card of an opponent's deck and put it on either the top or bottom of the deck, so you can effectively sort through for a face-off or just deny them good cards.
Yeah, which is like, you know, and both of those things are, you know, strong in their own right in a game. The more you use Inspired, the more powerful it becomes, because I want to go into a face-off, right, I'm going to look at the top card, oh, it's a 4, cool, I'll stick on the bottom deck, oh, it's a 1, I'll leave it on the top of the deck, you know, and you can kind of like build yourself an edge that way, which seems really cool.
It's also really cool that you are forced to do dual decks. You have to have 2 colours, because all the problems are either 2 specific colours or 1 colour and one of not that colour. So you're already getting a nice like faction identity, but then you can mix it with another one. I think you can even use splash and use 3 colours in this or more, because you've got cards where it's just
maybe
your main colour and not your colour. And also I think there are certain cards that lend themselves to splashing really well.
One of the things I just want to say about white is every time you've played with a white deck, I've thought, oh, those cards are hard. And this is a prime example, right? So if we look at this card here, costs 4 to get out, so it's definitely a mid to late game card, but it brings 3 power of its own, and then you can give +4 power until the end of turn to any other card, or any other friend. Well, if you're going into a face-off, +4 power in a face-off is a massive piece of leverage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's going to wreck face. You've effectively added 7 into your face-off in 1 4-cost card. So, you know, like I think that's just, it's just nice. It's just so good. Like I can just think of many uses for that one card.
Even if you didn't add new mechanics in 12 sets, I still think I'd really want to play lots of sets for this, because it's just such a fundamentally good game.
Yeah.
But also, the way it does add mechanics in, like with the faction-specific traits and stuff, it's just so well done and makes each one feel so individual.
Yeah, definitely.
And then having to mash 2 together, it just works so well.
Right, have we gushed enough on mechanics?
I think we really have. Like, we could probably do another 2 hours on the mechanics, but learning the game, I think learning the game was pretty easy. The rule books are pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The game is pretty simple when you boil it down and you go step by step.
The only thing, as we said earlier in the video, is the only thing that we had a little bit of difficulty with was really timing the troublemakers. But I think if you played with anybody who'd played like a game or a couple of games and had got their head around it, as soon as they show you how they work, you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And you get on with it. Because like, it felt like when we were playing our games, we were playing troublemakers, weren't we? And we were like, yeah, we're going to get this advantage. And then we like, because we were mistiming it, it's like, blimey, this is taking ages for this advantage to get there. So therefore they can defeat it. But the thing is that your opponent can't engage with a face down troublemaker. for the learning side of it, I would say dead easy.
Yep, definitely.
The kids, and that leads into like the kids aspect, right? So like, if you want to teach this to your kids, easy peasy.
Yes. We taught your daughter before I taught it to you in one evening after we'd cracked some packs, and
she was able to win a game
straight away.
Yeah, easy peasy.
So it also lends itself to kids like if you have a daughter, not so much
MLP.
if you have a son,
yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a really good one because
it needs like a G.I. Joe crossover.
I think it's a really good one because it just works, and if you can get past that skin, it is really good.
Yeah. So so for the fun aspect of it, the game is fun.
Yeah, we both enjoy playing it. There isn't particularly a game where either one of us has been like, oh, if stuff's not coming out, it's not coming out. That's part of playing card games. But you don't really have that in this because you can always fish by just spending action points.
Like I'll give you an example. Like at the moment, like I'm really nonplussed, aren't I? With all wargaming, card gaming, everything, right? Like I'm kind of like, I don't know, I've got a malaise. So I'm just not really that bothered. But games like this, I can play even when I'm not in the mood to play. Basically, like that's how fun it is. Like it is genuinely enjoyable. I think as well, like you're invested in it slightly, and the more decks you build, and the more you look for those synergies within your deck, the more engaged you become, or the more what's the word? The more you buy into it, basically.
But just to put it this way, we're still building decks and still running the base decks against them because they're just still fun.
Yeah, the theme decks still hold up.
Because the game is so back and forth, it always keeps you engaged. You're never like 10-0 down thinking, oh, I can't come back from this, because then suddenly you get 8 points in a turn.
Yeah. I think as well, like there's a lot of games, isn't there, where it's like you go, I go, and you feel like a disconnect really, and like maybe you're not really engaging with your opponent.
So like Pokemon, where you do everything in your turn and then your opponent does everything in their turn. With this, you are doing everything in your turn and your opponent is doing everything in their turn, but there is also the face-off element of it where suddenly you're involved in the turn. And
you've got to be thinking about that in your turn, because you're not going to be able to have any effect on it during your opponent's turn. Like, yeah, I know that may sound a bit backwards, but it's true.
So competitiveness is the last aspect that we normally talk about.
Yeah.
I think this can be I heard back in the day it was a really competitive game. Yeah. I can see how this can be an extremely competitive game once you throw in a few more sets, or we just get better at building decks.
Yeah, I mean, like there was one point where I was thinking, because like in this game you win when you get to 15 points, and I was thinking maybe in a competitive scene you could extend that up to 20, but there'd be no point. Like that's another aspect of the mechanics that we didn't really touch on. But I think it's really important in the competitive aspect of it, which is that 15 points just seems to be that, like, just as it's like a pot of boiling water, just as it's about to as it's about to spill over, that would be where 15 points is, and that's what this game feels like. It like bubbles up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, I've just got that last push for 15 points. There's a couple of games we've had where it's been like someone's been on 13 and then they've dribbled away like 2 points in their turn. But then there's been other times where, like, I think there was one game where I was like on 6 or 7. I think it might even been on the video.
There was one game where you got 8 points in a turn.
Yeah, and it was like, there we go. It's great.
But again, you were losing at that point and you were down. You'd got more actions going on.
Yeah.
And then you'd got all these actions that you could suddenly use.
Yeah. I'd say
as soon as a double face-off is triggered, the board gets cleared essentially. Some friends go back home, but 2 new problems come out and nobody's doing anything there. So it offers your opponent up the ability to just jump in there and get bonus points as soon as they can.
Which is another great balancing mechanic, just an inherent internal balancing mechanic. And I think that's really the absolute win of this game, is that it is balanced. As I said, like, we haven't been into other sets. And so therefore we don't know how unbalanced it can become. And although we've started building decks, we haven't like built like some next level meta deck. But
as with all the games we review, we've essentially bought one of all the product, and that's where we take a baseline from, because
definitely,
most people aren't going out and buying like 4 booster boxes for a new game.
No.
Like maybe when you've got a couple of sets in and you know how you feel about it and you know what the worth and value is there. But buying 1 starter set, 2 decks, and a booster box.
2 theme decks.
2 theme decks, sorry. And a booster box is more than enough.
Yeah, it feels like you've invested enough to have a really good, multifaceted game. You would be able to build multiple decks, each one of them, like, you know, with its own idiosyncrasies. I think it's just a decent game, man. Like, really good. Definitely out of the 4 we've done, boom, this one's easily the best one.
So my quick overview is, if you want to give this game a go, buy the 2-player starter set, play it. If you like it, buy 2 theme decks, then buy a booster box, and you'll have loads and loads of fun if you enjoy this game. Yeah,
specifically in that order, and make them 3 separate sets, 3 separate steps. Sorry, like I think you've got that small buy-in value, you've got that slightly more buy-in value, and then the booster box is where you're actually spending
and especially
a bit
the
more
way
money.
The products ramp as well, because you buy that 2-player starter set, and you can play out the box and have loads of fun with it.
Yeah.
You buy the theme decks, and suddenly you've got 2 extra characters for each of those theme decks, and one of the colours is in each of the starters. Yeah. So you're essentially getting all the colours, but you're also getting more of a lump of one colour for each one. So it suddenly plays into itself. And then a booster box to just go all out, whap happy, and just enjoy yourself, cracking packs and building decks.
Get the crazy stuff. So,
So not only does the game ramp when you're playing the cards, the game ramps when you're scoring, but also just the way you buy the product ramps. It's just so nice. Like, every aspect of this seems well designed to me, other than putting a My Little Pony skin on it. And that's just because I'm not into that. Otherwise...
Could you imagine the amount of wedge that they would have made? Like, if they'd have put this with like a skin that wasn't directed at like 4 to 8 year old girls. Do you know what I mean? Like, if this had some sci-fi skin on it, they would have absolutely coined until the cows come home or the ponies come home. Do you know what I mean? Like, it would have been insane. Like, I cannot.
Right.
I can't see this failing if you put a better skin on it that would appeal to a larger demographic.
There is a big MLP fan base. Or at least I think there is. Like, I hear that there is. But if you put a Marvel skin on this, or a 40k skin, or a Star Wars skin,
you could put a friggin' Star Trek skin on it, mate, and it would whip ass. Like, really, really impressive. Actually, I was going to say crazy, but it's not crazy. It's just impressive. It's just a good game, man.
And it's got well-written rules. It's not like Terminator, where those rules were clearly written by someone who assumed that you knew how to play the game. I don't know if Enterplay did any other games, which is the company that published this, maybe designed it. I'd have to check. But I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for their stuff, because this is so good. Yeah.
It'd actually be interesting to compare this to another one of their games. Right then, friend. Is that it?
It's been a long one, but yeah.
It has been a long one, but like, if you can't tell, we dig this game.
Yeah,
you know,
just
like,
buy it.
I mean, I would say go buy it, but like, money's tight in it. But like, it is a genuinely good game. So if you are interested, go buy it, man, because like, once you get past the MLP-ness, it's fantastic. Right, thank you very much for joining us. We will hopefully see you again on the next video. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode of Two Man Meta, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date as we release multiple episodes each week. If you would like to help support the channel, check out the links in the description below, as well as links to our social media pages. Thank you for watching. See you next episode.